Minutes. My favourite guest, former government special advisor James Price. But where do we start? I mean, I said it just then when I was with Ian. I was listening to Mike Graham this morning, sounding fantastic on Morning Glory, where he has decided that Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Thieves, otherwise known as Richard III, have actually morphed into each other, are as one, and he was doing impressions. So if you want to share that on Drive, you're very welcome. Do you think that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are as one? Apparently, despite being told to the contrary, Donald Trump had a phone call with Sir Keir Starmer over the weekend and it all went swimmingly well and he thinks he's doing a good job. Now, I would only suggest this. Patently, he doesn't. Everything you should say is always taken with a pinch of salt. He says, I'll come to Britain soon. Rumours are that he always comes to Britain first, but that's not happening. He's going to Saudi Arabia because they're going to give him $6 trillion. What was really interesting yesterday was, don't know if you saw this poll, British voters actually back... Why do people put actually? I've read here, British voters actually back Trump's policies. Well, they probably like what he's doing because not only is he a politician who stands up and says, I'm going to do this, but he's trying to deal with immigration and he's trying to low taxation. He's trying to make America more competitive again, which, frankly, if you think about it, is exactly what should happen in the United Kingdom. So many other little things I want to throw in today. We can... Royal Navy backlash. The Navy... This is going to get me going. Why did you put this in here? Want to rename submarine HMS Agincourt to avoid upsetting the French. I would do everything in my power to upset the French. Dreadful people. Give them £500 million and they won't deal with the migrant crisis. Navy bosses who are woke want to rename HMS Agincourt in case the French get upset. More than half of Gen Z, another great story, believes that Britain should be ruled by a dictator with no elections. See? Everybody's coming around to my opinion. And my favourite story of the day, my friends, my favourite story of the day, Ed Miliband, that idiot who was the Labour leader who couldn't eat a bacon sandwich and is on some crazy mission because he stupidly believes that net zero is what we all want, when in fact we want lower taxes and lower mortgage rates and for our children and our grandparents and parents to be able to go to the doctors, not old Miliband. He's hired a photographer at your expense to make himself look good, which I don't think is possible. 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. I'm going to munch on a bourbon and say a very good afternoon to James Price on Talk Drive. How are you, my friend?
I'm better than the poor guy whose job it's going to have to be to take photographs of Ed Miliband and make him look normal. I don't envy that at all.
I mean, this is the sort of thing. Welcome to a new week, JP. This is the sort of thing that you think, how deaf are politicians with respect, with everything that's going on in the United Kingdom? He wants to employ on our expenditure a photographer that will grab headlines and stand out on social media. It also allows for flexible working, noting that the expectation is for the civil servant to attend the office or a location only 2 to 3 days a week, not to get too stressed. In 2010, Miliband, or Millipede as I call him, slagged off David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, for hiring a personal photographer at a time when he was asking everyone in the country to tighten their belts. So Miliband, the trappings of office, completely hypocritical, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary, especially when all of us now walk around in our pockets these amazing devices, these mobile phones that have fabulous cameras in them, that you could just get some of the people that go on trips with you to take quick snaps anyway. We don't want our politicians looking all glamorous and fancy. That's what we have the royal family for.
But I don't think there's a chance of Ed Miliband ever looking glamorous and polished. Do you, in all honesty? Never.
No, I don't think so. But I think that's probably a good thing. You shouldn't want to do this. And the problem we've got now with the rise of so much social media is that all the politicians seem to now care about is the photo opportunity, is a short clip of them saying something banal that they think is witty and cutting on the floor of the House of Commons. They don't even listen for the answer afterwards. You get this in Prime Minister's questions and you get this kind of, well, I'm going to do this very bombastic thing now and I'm going to only have that bit there clipped up, put that on my social media so that my constituents might think I'm actually doing some work. And that's the depth of their thinking as well, which is, I think, the bigger problem.
I completely agree. What do you make of Ed Miliband using your taxpayer money, my friends out there in drive time land on Talk? What do you make of Ed Millipede spending your hard-earned cash on a photographer to make him look good. Not possible. 0344 499 1000. On a serious note, though, we can start... I'm going to start slightly differently today, JP. I want to talk about the Royal Navy backlash. This is, to me, exactly the sort of story that I know our viewers and our listeners just like me, it's not even funny, it's beyond funny. Royal Navy woke chiefs have come under fire for dropping plans to name a new attack submarine after the Battle of Agincourt, in which we defeated France. The seventh and final Astute-class submarine was to be called Agincourt, but it will be now named HMS Achilles instead. Grant Shapps, the former Defence Secretary, said the name change was nothing short of sacrilege, amid speculation it may have been undertaken because of a fear of offending the French government. What the bloody hell has the world come to? I don't like the French anyway, but really now we can't even name a submarine? God.
What about all the poor descendants of the Trojans, to whom the phrase HMS Achilles would be very, very triggering, right?
Very triggering.
Who's killed outside the walls and gates of Troy by evil, nasty Achilles.
And what about a top athlete who, whilst trying to qualify for the Olympic Games, did his Achilles heel and was never able to compete and has been traumatised, anxious and rather put down for the rest of his life?
Absolutely. Well, and Achilles, of course, was a classic example of toxic masculinity. It was all about his anger, wasn't it? You can't have an angry figure involved in a warship or a submarine that's designed to kill lots of people. I mean, it is really quite pathetic. And surely we think that the French would find it offensive that we think they still care. I mean, there are plenty of other great naval victories and land-based victories we've had over the French in the hundreds of years since the 100
Well, they've
years.
never won one. I don't like the French. I think we should do everything to hack them off, and I think we should take the 500 million back that we give them to help the migrant crisis, which hasn't worked. While I'm on one, before we get to Starmer, I forgot to say this in the opening. Peter Blexley on the way. Police officers have been told, you can't smile during this. Honestly, I'm going to leave this country, which will please a lot of people. Police officers, my friends, have been told not to use the terms black sheep and blacklisted in case they offend some. A 9-page document that forms part of the 2023 diversity guide for the staff at Bedfordshire Police and Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire Constabulary says that the terms risk portraying certain groups as inferior or superior to others. It states that pregnant person should be used instead of pregnant women, because of course a man can get pregnant, seriously. And Christian-centric language like the term faith should be avoided. It's gone mad. The world's gone mad. Seriously, you can't say blacklisted or black sheep.
Well, I mean, I may find myself on black ice talking about this, and it may lead to a media blackout here. But this kind of black comedy is getting a bit much, isn't it? Really. I mean, but it's the kind of soft bigotry of low expectations to assume that whether you're black or whether you're French, that you're going to be offended by these sorts of things. At what point do we stop adopting all of this kind of nonsense? Trump won. We don't have to pretend any of this stuff matters anymore. I think the worst example I've ever seen of this was in some stupid NHS document that was obviously just copy and pasted over from America when it was at the height of America's own woke nonsense. And it used this acronym BIPOC, which stands for Black and Indigenous People of Colour, which is one of these silly phrases that the Americans use as well. But it was transplanted into a British NHS document. Well, who are the indigenous people that were worrying about offending in the UK? That would be the Picts or the Woads or the Celts or something.
The Woads.
All this stuff is complete and utter rot. And Trump won, and we don't have to worry about this anymore.
It reminds me, years and years ago, Ryan's going to look at me because he thinks I'm going off on one. Years ago, when Ken Livingstone was the mayor of London, and they started to... He was in Brent Council, and it started to go very left-wing. And I don't even know where this has come from, Ryan, but it's true. They changed many things inside Brent Council. I don't know if you remember this. Blackboards weren't allowed. There were whiteboards. And one of the most important things was, this is absolutely true, the signs for bicycles? They repainted all of those so the bicycles didn't have a bar and had a basket on the front because they wouldn't then be male baskets. And the greatest letter, I've got it in my study at home, that was ever sent, was they decided, and this is Ken Livingstone, as I live and breathe, and it said so it wasn't sexist, they were going to rename manhole covers access chambers. And a bloke wrote to the local Brent Times and said, I now feel offended you've called them access chambers because I'm a Barclay card holder. That's the sort of crap, seriously, that we're talking about here. The world's gone mad, hasn't it?
Well, thank goodness that we're living in a country that's being so well run right now that we can focus on these things, and that crime is at record low levels, of course, right?
Yes.
It's not like 99% of phone thefts never go reported at any point. It's not like you've got dodgy, bogus, I would say, asylum seekers hanging around outside primary schools looking to do God knows what to our children. It's not like you've had some evil man go and stab a load of kids. It's not like we've got all these horrendous issues that make people scared to go out in the streets at night, that the police have all this time to be worrying about this kind of crap. It's absolutely outrageous. And don't forget, everybody at home, it's your tax money that's being spent.
Absolutely, and I'd love if you're at home. James, quite right. What do you make of this? The Navy want to rename a submarine not HMS Agincourt. That'll upset the French. The police can't say black sheep or blacklisted because that'll offend somebody. Ed Miliband spending hard-earned money on a photographer to make himself look good, and meanwhile this country's on its backside. Can I get to Starmer and Trump? Everybody knows that what I think about the Trump thing. In fact, my brother-in-law came to see us this weekend, and he's a right lefty. We were arguing big time. He thinks that Donald Trump is he's the worst thing since sliced bread. We'll disagree on that. Quite surprised to read over the weekend that apparently he had a rather sociable call with Sir Starmer, as expected to visit Britain soon, and says that Starmer's doing a good job. Now, I believe, and I could be totally wrong, there's a bit of mind games going on there, JP. What do you think?
I think that's a very good point. We've already, I think, had 20-something world leaders who got a call from Trump before Keir Starmer. I think of those top 20, only one, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, was European. I think everybody else came from around the world, which just shows the sadly increasing irrelevance, not just of our wonderful country on the world stage, but of Western Europe in general, the French as well, the Germans, the Spanish, the Italians are starting to do a bit of a comeback that maybe we could all follow. But that is very upsetting. And maybe Trump has decided, as you say, let's be nice to Starmer, kill him with a bit of kindness, to try and encourage Starmer to change course on the many areas in which he's gone completely wrong. And let's remember that Trump is himself half British. His mother was born in Scotland. Yep. He loves the United Kingdom more than any president ever has. He's desperate to see the old country, the mother country, do well. And it's clearly, I think, upsetting to him and to many other of our American cousins over the pond to see what's happening. We're all this talk about, British soft power. Our soft power is so important. Our standing in the world. That's why we've got to pay Mauritius to take sovereign land away from us. That's why we're not allowed to deport anybody, because we can't be seen to upset the Pakistani government, and we'll keep giving the Pakistani government and others foreign aid whilst they refuse to take back foreign Pakistani rapist criminals over here, where in fact the only soft power story that anybody in the United States or around the world knows about anymore is Britain's inability to deal with those same Pakistani child rape gangs. That's all any of my American family talk about. They say, what on earth is happening? And as we've got this nonsense about renaming boats and not saying blacklisted and all of this stuff, the rest of the world is saying, why are you not dealing with the ongoing issue of groups of Pakistani men raping children and it being covered up by local authorities and even police, perhaps? That's what we should be dealing with.
Mate, you know me, I could not agree more. And yet again, as I had that argument at my dinner table on Saturday night with my brother-in-law, who doesn't see that at all, told me that the majority of crimes committed, rapists are by white people. It's racist, it's this, that and the other. And the figures just don't bear themselves out. I'll tell you what was interesting over the weekend. A poll of 2,000 people backed, quite a serious poll, backed Trump's policies amongst British voters, who, for the first time ever, was saying, do you know what? Push aside the fact that he says stuff he shouldn't say and is a flawed character, but actually most of our politicians who appear or present themselves as perfect are flawed. They just keep it secret. These are all out there, warts and all. They agree with his policies. And furthermore, Gen Z support for that sort of dictatorship thing, somebody who's got the balls to come up and say, I don't care how unpopular it is, that's what I'm going to do. Swallowed up that poll. That's really interesting to me. I have to say that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I saw those polls and the numbers were really encouraging. It was, strong majorities in the UK, more than 50% of all these issues of what Trump is doing, and a quarter or so of people who still think just orange man bad. But just go and look at some of the exciting stuff that's happening there. Let's take the case of the deportations. You've got the fact that the US federal government was clearly aware about lots of foreign criminals, including sex offenders and violent criminals and all these sorts of things, to the point where on day one, the ICE, as the agents are known, could go to these people's houses and pick them up and start deporting them. So that means the Biden administration knew that there were violent criminals just wandering the streets.
And there's my point. I go back to my dinner table on Saturday because that iconic, and I don't care if people are offended. Let me know what you think. Disagree with me. It's absolutely fine. I love that more than anything. But there was a picture of the plane to take off for Colombia, and there was a row of illegal migrants who had committed crimes in the United States, shackled with chains, being led to the plane. Then the Colombian president said they're not coming, and Trump went, right, 25% tariff increase, you've got 7 days or it's 50. And he said, I'll send the presidential plane. Then he slagged him off. But the truth of the matter is, I'm with you. I think it's ideology. A lot more that needs to be done in many countries in the world, not just the United Kingdom, could be done, but people are too bloody scared. And I believe that whatever your politics, I think all people who are invested in just the smallest bit about what's going on with our country would say, we need politicians who take the flak and try and get something changed or make something better, because what else is the point of being a politician, essentially?
Yeah, completely right. And that point about democracy, I think, is really interesting. At least you now know, once again, who is in charge of the pond. You've seen the guy there. He's taking live questions all the time in the Oval Office as he's signing executive order after executive order. He's happy to stand or fall based on how those decisions work. Whereas here in the UK, let you into this mind-boggling fact that most people don't realise, but if you think about it, it makes sense. When the Labour government came in July, only 200 people changed their jobs. The 100 ministers who are made up of MPs or some lords, and the 100 former advisors, people like me. Everybody else in the whole of the civil service, in all of the stupid, pointless quangos, in all of the rubbish regulators that prioritise, dotting the T's and crossing the I's rather than any kind of growth or protection or anything. No one else changed jobs. There's only this tiny number of people, whereas in the States, it's tens of thousands of people had changed. And I think we need to go back to a system where we know the people who have the power, we know their names, we know what their job title is, and we can see the results of their behaviour over the next couple of years. And they can't hide like they used to behind the European Union. Thank God that's gone. They can't hide anymore behind the European Convention on Human Rights, the Human Rights Act, any of this kind of nonsense, because the hour is growing late. And it's getting to a point in this country where if we don't do something about it soon, we are going to fall under a tide of completely low growth and of tens of thousands more every year.
And look around the world, not just the American dream. Trudeau, that ridiculous liberal git, he's out in Canada. The whole of Europe has moved. Well, that Sir Keir Starmer would want to say to the far right. I just say it's moved to the centre of right, to be perfectly honest. And I think we need to catch up. This just in, though, I must share this with you. Bill from Romsey has just, this is not official, we will confirm if it's true. The Mayor of London has just decided to rename Waterloo Station to the Bastille Station, because apparently that would upset the French. So there we are. That's breaking news from Bill. We can't say Waterloo Station anymore because Sadiq bleeding. Is it Sir Sadiq? He genuinely is getting a knighthood, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think when he does get that knighthood, if it hasn't happened already, instead of the usual bejeweled sword being tapped on his shoulders and head, it should be a zombie knife confiscated from one of the many knife crime attacks that he's let happen in this city.
I love you, JP. Listen, have a great week, mate. Always good to have you on.